Welcome to Compliance Uncomplicated, an interview series dedicated to simplifying the unnecessarily complex world of risk and compliance. Hosted by Drata experts, each episode will tell a new story about high-growth startups and other brands that are building compliance pathways towards a culture of security. Every business, industry, and team has unique challenges when it comes to building trust. And for many startups, compliance is one of the first stepping stones towards that pathway. In each episode, we'll hear from founders, visionaries, and those tasked with building a foundation of trust for their brand. It's time to unravel the jargon and abbreviations and uncomplicate compliance.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to our first episode of Compliance Uncomplicated. My name is Alexa. I'm one of your co-hosts today. I'm also a part of Drata's stellar marketing team. Super excited to be here. For anyone listening who does not know what Compliance Uncomplicated is, this is a Drata podcast centered around founders and visionaries who are building amazing products and organizations. And it's really focused on how they're utilizing compliance and compliance pathways to accelerate their business growth and goals. We really wanted to hone in on the idea with this podcast that compliance should not be viewed as a hindrance to your organization because it really is an asset. So when we were thinking about who the perfect guest would be for today, we thought there was no better people than the co-founders at Drata. They truly have lived the spirit of what this podcast is about. So I'm super excited to welcome Adam Markowitz, Daniel Marashlian, and Troy Markowitz. Thank you all for joining today.
Thank you.
And
Thanks
I also wanted to introduce a co-host for today, Helena. Hi, Helena. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Alexa. Thanks for having me.
You want to give a little background to everybody listening about you?
Sure. I'm really excited to be joining you for this conversation. I am on the community team here at Drata, and I build community. If you haven't heard, community.drata.com. And if you'd like to continue the conversation, it's a great way to connect with Drata experts online. And to kick things off, I want to take it back to the beginning with a quick round of introductions. So I'll start with Daniel. We can kick it off with you. You can tell us a little bit about yourself, and then on to Troy and Adam.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Daniel Marashlian, one of the co-founders here and CTO. I run technology. Longtime engineer, classically trained as an engineer. Been an entrepreneur now for almost 2 decades, and been building companies with these 2 amazing guys for almost 1 decade now.
Hi, everyone, and thank you for having me. I'm Troy Markowitz, a co-founder and chief operating officer here at Drata. From the beginning, out of stealth mode, I was leading our go-to-market function and just recently moved into the chief operating role. Just to zoom out from a career standpoint, I started my career in management consulting, traveling all around the country. And I was always interested in how business was brought in, but I never really truly had the opportunity that is usually reserved for the principals and partners. And being a first year at a management consulting firm, I was mostly doing grunt work on spreadsheets. And so quickly realized I wanted to be in sales and be responsible for bringing in the revenue and see the fruition of my efforts pretty quickly. So moved into that. And then back in 2015, I moved to San Diego from Los Angeles for our last company, Portfolium, that we started.
Thanks for having me. Adam Markowitz, co-founder and CEO at Drata. In a prior life, my formal background education is actually in aerospace and astronautical engineering. I spent about 5 years after undergrad working on the NASA Space Shuttle program as an engineer before NASA retired the fleet, and I started a company called Portfolium with these 2 other gentlemen, and the rest is history.
I love it. Very unique sets of backgrounds here. So speaking of Portfolium, when we were thinking about this podcast, we really like Drata's own history came to mind with how we wanted it to be centered around how compliance can be such an asset to an organization. So I'd love to hear more about, maybe from Adam and Daniel, how the founding of Portfolium went down, if you can share some insights and how that really led to the acquisition of Portfolium and then how Drata came to be from there.
Sure. Daniel, want me to take a first stab?
Let's go. Do it.
So Portfolium was just Drata and so many other companies out there born out of our own personal and professional need. In this case, it was going from college to career and needing a way to prove our skills to employers beyond just a bullet point on a resume. Really, any situation where you need to earn trust quickly, like a job interview or during a sales demonstration with a prospective customer, it's important to earn trust quickly. And I was always obsessed with that. And going from college to career, needing a way to, again, prove my skills to employers. That was really the premise for Portfolium, which was like a LinkedIn-like network. Rather than just listing a skill on a resume, I would showcase evidence of my skills in actual portfolio, projects, papers, work samples, actual tangible evidence to prove to employers that I could do the things that I claim to do on my resume. I always believe that the best way to earn trust is prove that you first deserve it. And that's really what the premise was for Portfolium. Again, I was always obsessed with kind of the concept of trust. And it was even LinkedIn's former CEO, Jeff, who said trust is consistency over time. But in situations like a job interview where you don't have a lot of time to quickly earn trust, it falls on itself. And that's really where the portfolio came into play. And so started the company 2014 officially, and we actually started selling the software into colleges and universities, and they would onboard their students into this LinkedIn-like network where the students would then showcase their skills to employers. And over a almost 4 year stretch, we sold into almost 400 universities and had 5 million students in the network. But we quickly ran into, I would say, the next obstacle and pain that led to the founding of Drata years later, really with compliance. You can imagine the situation of us working and selling into a university, and a university administrator, not in these exact words, says something to the effect of, this is a great tool, we love Portfolium, it's really going to help our students prove their skills to employers. But before we sign the contract, can you prove your security posture to us? And really what they were looking for was a third-party attestation, a SOC 2 report to prove our security posture. And when the answer is no, it stings in a very unique way where you aren't almost living your own core value of earning trust by proving you deserve it. And feeling that pain, feeling that sting was kind of the initial light bulb moment for us, and what eventually became Drata years later after Portfolium was acquired.
That's a great answer. That was actually one of our next questions was, how is trust at the core of everything that you did at Portfolium, and how did you actualize it? So I'm going to go ahead and skip and go to the next question, which is for Daniel. At what point into the founding of Portfolium did you start your compliance journey, and what role did security eventually play into it? I know you touched on this a bit, Adam, but maybe if you want to expand, Daniel.
Yeah, of course. As we were building the business and figuring out a business model that worked and stuck and finding product market fit, as most, startups do, we really found that in building software for the universities and then providing Portfolium to the university as a whole, which then, all the students at the universities would be able to use it. And in that process, like Adam said, we would go sell to the buyer at the university. A lot of times it was a president or provost. Sometimes it was the technology department, like the CIO or someone like that. But during that procurement process, someone like the CIO at the university would, like Adam said, always ask us, eventually for a SOC 2 report and an ISO cert, things like that. And while, we heard that very early on, and Troy, leading up sales there, would come to me and say, hey, we got to get this SOC 2 thing. And, a decade ago, it'd be kind of like, all right, whatever, just, let's go close the deal. Or, I would get a security report that was 300 questions long or whatnot, and staying up till 2 a.m. doing them. And then the more and more the business started to succeed, Troy kept coming over to me more and more, and I'd be staying up till 2 a.m. now every day. And it'd be like, all right, what's going on with this SOC 2 thing or compliance world? And we really dove into it. That was probably, a few years into the business. And so we started diving into it, learning a bit about it, and making that decision, talking to experts and consultants around us. And as we continued to, start that research and collect evidence, it was right around the time actually that we got acquired. So that was, that happened. And as we continued to, build up towards our SOC 2, I started working with leaders at Instructure, was the company that acquired Portfolium, the makers of Canvas. And they had an amazing security team, a multinational, multi-billion-dollar company with probably one of the world's largest data sets on students. And that security team, they did a great job at what they do. And I worked with them to go get our SOC 2 under the Drata umbrella of Canvas. And, so we did that, and we did that over a couple of years as you get your type 2 and you continue to monitor it and whatnot. And and from that was, again, a piece of the puzzle of the starting story of Drata is is manually collecting evidence and taking screenshots and working, the security teams to always just, have meetings and about what's going on our security posture. And, the engineering, kind of light bulb started going off again. And it was like, wait a second, this is what you need. We could go grab that from this API or that API. And that was, one of the stories of how we're doing what we're doing and trying to automate compliance.
Yeah, totally. Do you feel that the manual compliance process that you went through slowed down the progress at Portfolium?
Yeah.
This from the engineering side, and Troy, if you want to take it from the GTM point of view, that would be awesome.
Yeah, on the engineering front, of course, we were a small, mighty team. On the entire technology team, there was about 10 of us. And, to be able to rip a third or a half of people to go across all the systems, take time to do access reviews, evidence around the infrastructure, code repositories. It was a lot while we're, building a ton of product for the universities and students. Yeah, it was a big, you can call it pain, but, just time suck of where to prioritize effort. So it slowed us down. At the end, it did make us more resilient. So I see the value of it. And AKA we started the company that businesses see the value across everything else. But the manual effort was like that laborious part. And it was like, how do we just make this easier for everyone?
I know you mentioned Portfolium was founded in 2014. And how quickly did you hear from universities that you needed a SOC 2? Was it immediately when you started speaking to universities about what Portfolium is? And did either three of you know what a SOC 2 was and just didn't realize you needed that report? Or was it opening an entire new can of worms here? Anyone can take that.
Troy?
Why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, I can take that question. It wasn't immediate at all. We will go through security reviews, and Daniel and team would provide answers to either questionnaires or we would do it over Zoom. But it came down to just showing evidence that we were doing the right things. Daniel kept saying we are doing the right things, but the universities and colleges needed to see evidence of it, going back to Adam's comment about proving with evidence that we're doing the things that we say that we're doing over and over again. So to answer your question, we didn't hear immediately, show us your SOC 2 report. But the things that are encompassed and comprised in a SOC 2 report, they were wanting to see evidence of that, but not the report itself. And just to zoom out, they essentially wanted to see just our commitment to protecting student data. And so we started to go into the details of the data that we were actually bringing into the platform, which wasn't considered, I think, what the universities called like level 1 data. We were bringing in like social security numbers and things like that. But nonetheless, we still had data that was a part of a system, and we had to show the ways that we were protecting it from a tech standpoint. And so when we did start to hear about SOC 2, it was maybe toward the mid or latter half of our journey. And we were showing them the AWS SOC 2 report or SOC 2 reports for the vendors that we were working with, because that's how we interpreted the question at first. And that's a common mistake that I see a lot of folks make, but they wanted to see how well Portfolium was protecting student data, even though that we were working with these other entities. And this kind of plays into the value of Drata, because you're only as strong as your weakest link or weakest vendor. That's why vendor management is a big part of SOC 2. So we didn't see it in the beginning, but security was always a part of any due diligence for bringing on a customer. And to answer your previous question too, it did elongate sales cycles by not having this. We needed to work with tech and, of course, providing the responses that they needed and the adequate details. There was also impact to the things that Daniel and team weren't working on, and took away from the other critical needs in the product and other things as well.
And here we are years later, and I'm still always blown away when I think back to the synergies between both companies, because both companies are in such different spaces, right? Education technology and compliance automation. Most people scratch their heads when they see that on the surface, but just one layer deeper and you see the concept behind Portfolium was I could put the word leadership on my resume, but I want to actually showcase evidence and prove my leadership skills with Portfolium. I could say that we encrypt our databases, but I actually need to be able to prove it with evidence. It's the same exact concept, just applied to a different space, but trust is at the center of both these companies.
Even the product that one of the products that we sold to universities and colleges was also based on trust and evidence as well, because one of the tools that the universities used was for accreditation. They needed to prove that learning was taking place in the class. And so we would surface that information for them to prove with evidence that they're teaching what they claim to be teaching in these courses based on their curriculum. And then at the same time, we would surface skills unbeknownst to the students that they were acquiring to help bridge that entry-level skills gap. So
the rubrics that universities would use for accreditation are so similar to the SOC 2 standard and other frameworks that we support in Drata. It's the rubric that you use to assess and then attest to how well a company or a student is performing.
And I think that's the parallel that I think most of them know about when they hear about education technology and what we sold to universities and colleges, and the significant parallels to what we do now and how we provide value and deliver that to our customers.
Yeah. And Troy, I know you mentioned trust, and you've been a key player at Portfolium and Drata and played a key role in building trust with customers. I'm curious, what impact do you feel that building trust with customers has on security and compliance, and how customer centric of an organization Drata is? I know we say it, but it's true. Customers are at the center of everything we do at Drata. So I'd love for you to just expand on how you continuously build trust with our customers.
Sure. And, trust is a pretty, I would say trust played a huge part. It's the core of everything we do. And when I say trust played a big part in bringing on the amount of customers that we have as early as we did and as fast as we did. And when I say trust, it plays a huge part, especially while we were bringing in customers without even a public website, meaning we were in stealth mode almost 2 years ago, and we didn't have a public website, and we were still bringing in customers. And I was blown away. And the feedback that we kept hearing is that, we are establishing trust and credibility. Part of our sales motion is very educational. A lot of our buyers have not done this before. And so part of being able to get that credibility is to educate and to inject, decision factors into the decision scorecard of our potential buyer. So when they're going on the buyer's journey, we're enabling them. And so there's a big part of how we're able to, obtain that trust. You don't get it right away. We definitely have to earn it. And we don't take it lightly that companies are trusting us with something so critical to their business. We have to deliver. Companies come to us because they either have their SOC 2, ISO, et cetera, and they're wanting to maintain it. It's very easy to lose it. It's very easy to fall out of compliance. They want to increase visibility. They don't have enough people power, and they're running lean teams, or they're coming to us because they have to close a big customer, and they're getting blindsided by the asks that we were getting at our previous company. So we take a very, keen and empathetic approach. But from a practical standpoint, just to answer your question, in sales in general, it does ultimately boil down to trust. And I look at that as like the customer's perception of a salesperson's credibility and whether they believe the salesperson is acting with their best interests at heart. That's essentially like how I look at it and how we've run the teams and the go-to-market teams right from the very beginning. I'm not sure if anyone's heard of Joshua Friedman, but I've read a lot of his work. He's a specialist in emotional intelligence. He's an actual author as well. But he says trust is built from the 4 C's: commitment, caring, consistency, and competence as well. And then I also added a few that kind of resonate with our buyers, which is the reliability factor. We don't overpromise. We want to manage expectations. And then just plain honesty. We want to overly communicate, going back to injecting decision factors and educating our buyers to our prospects, helping inject these decision factors so that we could obtain that trust and credibility, the things that they might not have considered from the beginning. And then, of course, our responsiveness, follow through is critical in this sales journey to establish that trust that we're gonna do what we say we're gonna do. I think one of the biggest things that has helped us, we received a lot of feedback, is objectivity. It's difficult for a lot of sales reps to demonstrate because obviously we want to close the deal. There's a bias there where we want to, the salesperson wants to make their commission, but I think the most powerful way to build trust and to build these trusting relationships is this objectivity element here, because we obviously want to sell our product and we have to execute on the roadmap, and they need to know that we're going to follow through with that. I know there's a lot said there. We don't take it for granted that we are getting the trust that we are, and we're constantly proud of delivering that.
Yeah, something that you mentioned is the point on education and how we make an effort to really educate our customers on what compliance is, especially considering organizations that have maybe never heard of compliance or don't know what a SOC 2 report is. Daniel, I'm curious, from someone who's held the CTO hat multiple times, How has your view of compliance changed since starting at Portfolium now to being at Drata?
It's mainly made consistent from the understanding of the need of it, but then the actual implementation of it has changed a lot, primarily due to we are, drink our own champagne here at Drata and use the product to maintain our own internal compliance. Early on, it was, okay, we have to do this thing because, Troy and the sales team need it. And all right, that was something important to, help deal cycles go, and obviously prove and, continue to gain trust from the buyers that we are encrypting databases, et cetera, right? So it was just like, all right, we have to do this thing and we have to prioritize what we're not going to do and build product. And so it was a little painful in that way and just, as a priority action. But the more and more I got into it and the more and more I understood it, it was like, hey, what if we did this from the start? What if day one, Adam and me and Troy had these security policies? What if we embedded the practices into the engineers from, day zero? And so by putting security and compliance at the forefront of the business as you start, just like good organizational practices or building great core values of your business, putting security at the forefront of these companies that we start, it really has made it not only easier in the operations of it, but much more impactful. Not only, when Alexa, when you started at the business, one of the first things you did was go review our security policies. You took cybersecurity training. It's whoa, this company does take this stuff seriously. This isn't something I just had to do 6 months in. It was almost day one. And I think that really spreads throughout the culture of the business. So I've loved the growth of it in my own career and understanding the value. At the end of the day, as I've compared businesses of past, Drata is a much more well-oiled machine. And that was due to the decision of following these practices from day zero.
Yeah. And as you mentioned, Daniel, we drink our own champagne here at Drata, and we are a security first organization. Adam, I'm curious, this podcast is really centered around how, younger organizations should view compliance as an asset and maybe even a competitive advantage to their organization. What are some of the values you think that cybersecurity offers as a leading element of the business, while also ensuring it doesn't slow down progress or create barriers for organizations who are really early on in their security journey?
Yeah, I think just to double click on, I think the answer coincides with what Troy was talking about earlier, just like the empathy of working with our customers. Like we were and still are our own customer, right? This is a problem that we solved for ourselves and in our prior lives, and then built a product to do it for everyone out there, including ourselves. So, when we're talking with a customer, prospective customer, it's coming from a true place of empathy. We've been in their shoes. We still are in their shoes. We didn't even come out of stealth 2 years ago until we had our own SOC 2 report in hand and use our own tool to get it. That's how ingrained it is. And that's when it's coming from such an honest and an empathetic place. It's core to the DNA, like trust, empathy. It's all there from the beginning. I think what Troy and the whole go-to-market function did really is go from this founder-led sales motion in those earliest days to very quickly a very well-scaled sales team that still demonstrates that same empathy and builds that same trust. So much of it comes just from speaking our own story of ingraining security and compliance from the very beginning, the way Daniel just said. It's when it's something that you do day one as an employee at Drata, you don't think twice really about it. I don't think before I put my seatbelt on in the car. It's just second nature because it's so ingrained from early childhood. So in that regard, it's, the earlier you start, the faster, cheaper, and easier it is to maintain. Everyone sleeps better at night and you have to move faster in the long run. The longer you wait to start implementing controls and processes that are going to secure the organization, it's tougher. There's inertia that's built up. There's more assets, there's more people to try to move in a new direction. And that's always difficult. It's not impossible, of course, but it takes a little bit longer and it's more expensive. And you don't sleep as well at night. So anytime you're implementing any process, the sooner you start, it's just ingrained from the beginning, and that doesn't feel like one step backwards to take 2 steps forward.
Yeah, I like your analogy of putting on your seatbelt. Like that's very second nature. So how else do you think it takes a level of leadership buy-in as well to have an organization that is security first to the point where it would just be like putting on your seatbelt, or what other tips can you give to leaders who are really early on in the process?
Yeah, absolutely. Being bought in from the beginning, from leadership, through and through. I don't think it could get done, and definitely not get done effectively without that. If it's looked at as a check the box activity that we just need to get through, one, it's short-sighted and it's not accurate. This is something that you have to maintain once you implement. And we learned that, again, from our own experience at our last company. Once you go through all that work and you're done high-fiving because you got your first SOC 2 report, you quickly realize I have to maintain this. And this is something that the audit period is continuous. So it's not like I could just cram for this 11, 12 months from now. I have to show the continuous operating effectiveness of my controls. That's what I should want anyway from my organization. So yeah.
Yeah, and I'll expand on that question. That was a great question, Alexa. Compliance is not an easy journey for a lot of people, and it can be confusing. Just, as advice, leaders who've been through this before, what advice would you give to someone who might feel weighed down by compliance and maybe overwhelmed on where to even start? And I'll throw that out to the whole group.
So it's a lot better than it was even just a few years ago. There's tools that could help you get there quickly and maintain it. I compare Drata oftentimes to kind of the self-driving car and the GPS in one. It's going to not just be get you to the destination. It's going to show you how to get there and then do as much on autopilot as possible along the journey.
Yeah, it's on the, more on the tech perspective. We've all been saying there are tools like Drata to help you there, but there's more than to just compliance than getting the report or gathering the evidence to show an auditor to eventually, review your, review of it and your adherence to it across the year. There's there's cyber insurance, there's endpoint detection, there's pen tests, and there's, more to that. And where, a decade plus ago, a lot of that stuff is hard to deal with, or who do I go through a broker, and not just pressure on the technology team, but on finance teams and obviously leadership teams. So nowadays, a lot of it has been either commoditized or just streamlined, right? There's a lot of cyber insurance companies out there that are similar to the Geicos of the world, where you can go on and just fill in your company information and hit a button. So it's a lot easier to go do these activities and not have to incur these huge costs, not only financially, but time away from focusing on other items of your business. So I think as the company or as the industry has matured and realized that the spider web down from the Charles Schwabs of the world down to the 1-2 person startup, security is important, and all of our customers' data and taking it serious is very important. It makes it easier, and hopefully, and we believe that Drata is aiding in that process of the community.
We're going to take a little bit of a turn with our questions here. For anyone who doesn't know, we have 2 American Ninja Warriors on the call. Very special, Troy and Adam. So my first question, Daniel, when are you going to be an American Ninja Warrior?
I literally was doing these things called atomic push-ups yesterday, and I felt like an American Ninja Warrior. That was the hardest exercise I've ever done in my life.
There we go. Was that a 2023 New Year's resolution?
No, just been.
Can you demonstrate what a atomic push-up looks like for the group?
I need a TRX rope, and you're hanging upside down. You're doing push. I don't even know what it was. I blacked out.
Okay, so with that question, I really want to know, Daniel and Adam, how did you 2 meet initially before forming Portfolium?
We met on the ping pong table at a startup incubator here in San Diego.
Oh, so who's a better ping pong player?
I don't know.
Time will tell.
There was a tournament at one point.
There was.
My memory is a little fuzzy, but we'll have to. There's footage somewhere.
We have to get a Drata tournament going then. I need to see who's going to be the reigning champion.
Yeah, I will say Adam turns it on when the pressure's on. That is a Markowitz gene trait.
It's a good thing. And actually, so we were in a startup incubator in San Diego. I was there at Portfolium trying to learn how to code to get this first version out the door. And Daniel was actually there with a different startup. We actually met the first day we pitched to even get into the incubator. And Daniel, just so good-hearted. I mean, he walked past my computer screen and he would see me just not knowing what I was doing, but just doing whatever it took to get this MVP out the door. Right? I was coding right on the server, had no idea what I was doing. And he didn't poke fun. In fact, later on he told me he respected the fact that I was willing to do that. And I didn't have an ego about it. I knew this wasn't going to scale, but I had no other choice. And in those early days, you have to do whatever you can to get something out the door and prove you have something. And it was maybe months later, after a lot of ping pong games, where I realized there was an opportunity to bring Daniel in and really let Daniel take the technology, thankfully, out of my hands. And I was able to convince him somehow.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And look at where we are today.
Exactly.
Yeah. So go play ping pong, kids. It's not a dead sport.
There we go. Ping pong solves it all. Okay, before we wrap up, Daniel, I saw on your LinkedIn recently, you shared a post about mentioning a quote that you've modeled your entrepreneurial career off of. Ideas are just a multiplier of execution. I really liked that, and that resonated with me because early on in my career in college, one of my mentors shared a quote with me that has really stuck with me in my personal and professional life. So Adam and Troy, I wanted to know if you have any quotes or books or anything like that has helped guide you, or anything you can share with those listening on what's helped your entrepreneurial spirit. Adam, you want to start?
Sure. Yeah, you can't see it, but behind me, there's like a makeshift mini shrine to the late Kobe Bryant. So there's no shortage of Kobe Bryant quotes scattered around my office here. One that comes to mind very, very often is, "May you always enjoy the road, especially when it's a hard one." Talks a lot about enjoying the journey and entrepreneurship, and is meant to be difficult. It's really meant to be hard. That's what makes it great, and that's what I love about it. And it's a healthy reminder to enjoy every single day, even especially the hard one.
I would say, I know Daniel would say The Art of War, and it's definitely my blurred background, but that was a gift from Daniel a while ago. There's a lot of books and quotes, I think, that have contributed. One that comes to mind that I think about, it's a book I read a long time ago called How, just HOW, by Doug Seidman, and he coins the phrase like "hows matter," which kind of goes into the topic of a lot of things can be reverse engineered, but it's the how that separates us from others, especially if you're selling a tool that is looked upon as very similar on the surface, or you're selling certain products that are very similar or that multiple places of business do sell, but it's how we conduct business. From even what Adam had mentioned earlier about us coming out of stealth mode with our own SOC 2, I think about things from a principal performance perspective and how we conduct ourselves. And, my mind goes to go-to-market, of course, as well. So it really resonates. I think he talks about it in his book that you can go to a lot of stores to go buy a TV. You can go to Best Buy, you can go to many stores. They carry the same TVs. Like, why do you go to a particular store over others? And it's the how element that separates. It's that walk over to that aisle where that TV is located. It's what is discussed on the way there based on their needs that is going to separate them and going to make them buy from you over anywhere else. And I think about that in everything that we do. And so anyway, that's the first book that comes to my mind.
And with that, we're gonna end it here. Adam, Daniel, Troy, thank you so much for being with us today. This was super insightful. Helena, thanks for co-hosting with me. It's been great.
It's been a pleasure, Alexa. Thank you, guys.
Awesome. And we will see you all on our next episode of Compliance Uncomplicated. Bye.
Bye. See you guys.
Thank you for listening to Compliance Uncomplicated, a Drata podcast. To learn more about the series, go to drata.com/uncomplicated. Discuss this episode on our community secured at community.drata.com, or subscribe to our newsletter, Trusted, to stay up to date on the latest episodes.